I will tell you there's certain types of content that perform very well on certain platforms. Okay. So on LinkedIn, on Twitter, like or X now, like this type of content works really well. Like very simple, listicle based content. And it's funny because like I'm not really doing anything controversial here, but you wouldn't believe how controversial people make this post. like just because I said SEMrush instead of Ahrefs, or I said Hunter instead of X, or whatever, whatever thing you want to insert there, someone will find some sort of flaw with what I said. This is good. This is what you want. You want people to disagree with you. And I think this is the thing that people get afraid of when they post on LinkedIn or on X, because it's not fun having trolls. Let me tell you, it's not exactly the best thing when you have trolls and they take what you say out of context. And, I deal with that on a daily basis. However, I also know that taking a stand and having a little level of polarization is good. It's good. It creates engagement. It makes people interested in the content. It gets them to stop scrolling, right? That's what we're trying to do. We need to get them to stop scrolling. Like we're trying to like the thing is what you have to realize on social media, this is really any place where you create content. You're not just competing against the people in your industry. You're competing against anyone who's trying to extract attention from the people that you want to get in front of. So when you go on X or you go on LinkedIn, like you're not competing against other SEOs. You're also competing against Jake Paul, right? So like these are the things you have to be thinking about. Like you have to get someone to stop. And that's why having a little, like if you're trying to stay in the middle with your content, just experiment, making it a little, like take a little bit of a stand. I'm just telling you, it makes a big difference. And that's why, like, funny thing is, I actually don't really look at what happens after I publish. It's kind of like it's like I take a grenade and I throw it and I walk away. That's what I do because I know how to get people, how to do things to certain people in this industry in particular. So what happens is my team member Amber goes through and she goes and likes all the comments, and she gets to see all this stuff. But the point is that's for me, I'm focused on just like what can I create that's going to get as much interest as possible and get as much engagement as possible. And I don't always do that, right? I don't always do that. But the reason I'm showing you this one in particular is because this is the type of content I'm talking about as far as integrating the product into your content. This is one angle that you can use. Another angle is just like doing like a mini audit on YouTube, for example. So like if you go on my YouTube channel, I do this like all the time, like constantly. It used to be, I used to do it with other tools, right? I used to do it with, SEMrush and whatever else. Okay. But if you go into here and we'll go and look at just like this most recent video and see here, you'll see like the way that I do this is I always integrate, like I don't make it about the product. I make it about the process. So I'm going through the process of doing SEO. I'm going through the process of getting results. The tool is just a vehicle to get the result. And that's actually how I feel even about our tool. Like our tool, it's just a tool, right? Like I have two cars in my house. One of them we never drive. It just sits in the garage because it's just a car. Like it doesn't have any utility if it just sits there. Like it only has utility if you drive it. So it's the same with the tool. Like we have to actually use the tool. And I can tell you quantifiably when you make this process of creating new SEO content, upgrading your existing assets, optimizing existing assets, when you make that a part of your daily routine, whether it's for your own business or your clients' businesses, that's where the real value of this tool comes into play. You almost have to create like a habit around it. But the point is like, this is what I'm talking about as far as integrating it into your content. Okay. And then of course there's other options. You can go and look at Rankability Review and see all the people that have written reviews about it. This is also an angle that you can use, like a pure review type of post. These are very effective. So once again, once the affiliate program comes in, you're going to be able to just swap in your links and then be able to get the commission on that. So, but anyway, that's it. So just to congratulate these individuals, and then the last piece of this, I'm like 80% of the way done with the Rankability Academy. Okay, so It's about 7 videos, and it's literally going to walk you from end to end. It's not, I promise you, this is not going to be one of those boring product videos that you literally turn off within the first 3 seconds. This is actually, I'm going to like, rankability will be used in this process, but I'm really walking you through specifically how to build out SEO content that ranks, like the whole process end to end. And then the final video, I'll show you like, it's more than just publishing content, then all the steps that we take after we publish that content. There's more that we have to do. So I'm going to be walking through that whole thing. So I'm like I said, I'm probably about 80% of the way done on this. And then it will go to the editor, and then hopefully, I'd say within the next couple of weeks, we should have it good to go. So anyway, quick update on that. And then the last thing, as you guys probably saw, it's no secret now, that the ranking factors, well, quote unquote ranking factors leak from Google. And that's, people have been kind of digging into that, and there's like 14,000 different possible variables that Google might use in the algorithm. Honestly, you could study that all day, but at the end of the day, it has not changed anything. In fact, all it has done is confirmed a lot of these processes that, and if you've been following me for any time, like a lot of these processes have just basically been confirmed. And the truth is, a lot of what I share is based on anecdotal evidence, right? Because I'm actually, like, for example, I was looking at a keyword today. Someone wanted me to look at one, and I looked at it, and the first thing I see is like in the local pack, it's exact match domain, the first two. Okay. When you see that, and then you see that across multiple SERPs, you keep seeing it over and over and over and over. It's pretty easy to conclude anecdotally that, hey, maybe exact match business names actually work. Like, it's not like it doesn't require you to understand the intricate details of the algorithm. You just see it with your own eyes, right? And that's the way that I typically do things. So I see a particular trend or a certain thing that might be working, and then I go and test it myself, and I see the results of that, and then I test it again and again and again, and eventually I say, that works. Okay, that's what I do. That's how I figure out SEO. I have never been someone who like spends my nights reading Google patents. I just don't, for me, that's not the way I operate. I like to just get my hands dirty, and that leads to a lot more mistakes, but at least I'm able to quantifiably know like, okay, yes, X works and Y doesn't. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because if you can get just what I have on the screen here right, if you can just get this right, that's like, I'm telling you, this is probably 80% of all SEO. I'm serious. If you can just get these elements right, everything else will work itself out. You'll get links naturally, right? That's what we're trying to do. We want to get some links naturally. We don't just want to have to go and buy them, because you can only buy so many links because you're restricted by your budget. So you need a way to be able to acquire links naturally. Once again, the lead domino for getting backlinks is content, right? So a couple key points here on uniqueness, all right? This is one thing that I talk about a lot in the upcoming Rankability Academy, but the key here is when we're looking inside of Rankability, so I'll show you real quickly. Go to, this is actually the one I just did inside of, for the actual Academy, okay? So the first thing you want to do is, it's not always about finding like a revolutionary angle for your content. Sometimes that is a requirement. Like if you're going against a really competitive keyword and you're up against some heavy hitters, then yes, you're going to have to spend a lot of time in this early phase of like, okay, what's an angle that we could do that no one else has done, right? What's that kind of like purple cow type of angle? That's only really necessary though when you're dealing with highly competitive keywords. So for example, when I created one for best SEO books, that's a highly competitive keyword. So what I did is I really thought hard about like, what's the angle I could pick for that? And so I ended up saying, okay, well, I'm going to buy I think I bought 26 or 28 books on Amazon. I literally went on Amazon, bought all 26 or 28 of the SEO books, and I read them all. And it was very, very painful experience. Trust me, it was not the greatest. And but for me to be able to sleep at night, I actually had to read all those books. And so all I did for like a month was just like read these books. And it was pretty rough. But I knew if I did that, there weren't a lot of people that would be willing to do that. Like that. And so that's what I think about. And I like to call that like the Mr. Beast method, right? And that's what Mr. Beast does. He does some like crazy angle that when you look at his content, you can't replicate his content. It's just not possible unless you have the budget or the resources. So that's what you're thinking about there when that purple cow angle is an angle that's so good that you build a moat around that content and your rankings, right? And the bigger that moat is, the more fortified your rankings will be. And on top of it, when you have a purple cow angle and you look at the search results and it's all the same stuff, listicle, generic listicle after generic listicle. And then all of a sudden you've got this like off the wall angle. Well, guess who gets all the links? It's always the one that's the purple cow. The purple cow gets all the links. It's just, and by the way, I didn't invent purple cow. It's a Seth Godin concept, but I like to apply it, in the context of SEO. So that's option number one. Like I said, only necessary in highly competitive keyword environments. Option number two is you can differentiate within the content itself. So sometimes, just looking at some of the competitors, you can see so we'll look at this one. You'll see that when I look at the competitors, I can look for what's missing. Okay. So what's missing from these SERPs? So when I look at these, every single one of these top ranking results is promoting themselves. That's it, right? They're just promoting themselves. They're promoting commercial pages. They're using commercial pages to rank. So the likelihood that I could beat them by just having a commercial page is pretty low, right? If I just tried to replicate what they're doing, my success rate possibility is going to be much lower, in my opinion. So what I did is I said, okay, well, I'm going to look at these and I'm going to create a listicle that intentionally talks about my competitors, quote unquote, because I know that that's going to be a much more comprehensive asset. I'm going to be able to build out way more relevance than they can because I can actually talk about their products and their services in my content. So when Google goes and crawls all these different pages, my page is going to be the top option because the algorithm is going to say, well, this is the most relevant asset, therefore it should rank. So we're thinking about this in terms of relevance. And so this is another situation where the differentiation sometimes isn't doing something fancy. Sometimes it's literally just being the most relevant option. That is the differentiation. And I've done this repeatedly over and over and over. Just being the most relevant option can help you win. That's it. And like I said, when I build out an asset, I'll show you the live asset. Let's see here. Go down. 1 second. Sorry. Okay. So this one here, this is the live asset. And when I build out, I don't always build every asset the same. So when I build an asset like this, and it's for a low competition keyword, I'm treating this as what I would consider a minimum viable piece of content. So when I publish this, in my mind, this is just version 1.0. I fully expect to have to revisit this page because what I don't want to do is invest a massive amount of time in a piece of content when I didn't need to. And this is also applicable to when you're outsourcing your content. You don't want to send over a project to a writer and say, hey, write me 3,000 words when you only needed 1,000 because you just wasted money. That's the last thing there. Or you hire a very high caliber writer when you could have just hired a mid-tier writer. And so that cost adds up. On a singular basis, you can take the hit, but as that compounds over many keywords and many pieces of content, that can really start to hurt, as far as your profitability. So this is why you got to be really careful with that. There are some situations where I have to go swinging out of the gate with the best piece of content that I could ever create, right? But once again, that's only in highly competitive environments. So like I said, this one is a very simple piece of content, but it's the most comprehensive for this keyword. You're always just competing in this one keyword, and you can't apply the same principles across all keywords. You just apply it for whatever the current landscape is, the current competition. So you can adjust the dial depending on the competition, and your content should be should adjust accordingly. Okay. So just to show you, very simple. It's got some unique graphics here. I'm linking out to my competitors intentionally. Like this is all a part of the plan. Okay. And I've repeated this exact angle across other cities in the United States. Obviously, Vancouver's in Canada, but I've repeated this in the United States, and it works very, very well. And it's the same exact type of content. Okay. So the point is we need to figure out differentiation. That's the key. And like I said, sometimes it's the purple cow, sometimes it's just being the most relevant option. And then the third one is if everyone is relevant, let's say you're competing for one, but like everyone has good, highly relevant pages, then now you got to start to think about how do we add certain elements into our page that are really going to make it super unique. And I talk about that in the upcoming training, so I won't get too deep into that, but that's something you have to think about. Okay. The other one here is freshness. I think it's very clear what you need to do on this front. Like I've tested this so many times. I'm telling you, when you take an old asset that's just been sitting there for a really long time, you give it a nice facelift, you republish it, it almost always gets a performance boost, like almost always. So whenever I'm starting an SEO campaign, especially with an existing website, the first place I look at is like, what are some pages that we can immediately upgrade and republish? And when I say republish, that means upgrade it and then change the publish date. That's it. That's what I do. And I can tell you it works very, very well. In fact, a little example here, and this is why it's so important to track your rankings, by the way. So I'll show you this real quickly. This is like a perfect example of why freshness works really well. Okay. So let me get this up so you can see the historical performance of this piece of content. Okay, so this piece of content on Gotcha SEO specifically, all right, so this is for best CMS for SEO, all right, and you can see like at one point it was like 2020, it was doing pretty good, and then started to drop off, and then finally it was basically on its way to the graveyard. It was about to die, and it was ranking really well for a long time for its main keyword. But what happens is over time, it's not necessarily that you've done anything wrong sometimes. It's just that the piece of content that you created has not been updated in a very long time. Okay. And you need to go back through and update it. So like this one, I think this says 2019, but I think it might have been even older. I think it was honestly 2016 when I first published this piece of content. And I don't think it ranked for anything for a really long time. And so it was basically the same piece of content for, going on 7 years, essentially. So what I did is I went through and I got new data. I collected new data and I kept the old data, by the way. I kept all the old data, but I just upgraded it with new data. I didn't do anything super fancy. I just updated it with new data. And once again, this goes back to the originality element. All of this data, I made it. This is original data that I found based on the analysis that we did here. So yes, someone could take this data and copy it, but that would be odd, right? So this is a situation where like finding an opportunity to create levels of uniqueness in your content, it doesn't need to be super huge. It can just be like, here's a bunch of data that we collected that no one else has. That's it. That's like a unique element in there that you could add. Okay. So, but once again, this goes back to the freshness element. I went and I upgraded this asset, republished it, and you can see the results, right? This is the outcome. And now I think it ranks #1 for best CMS for SEO. Okay. I didn't do anything revolutionary. I just added fresh content to it. So that's going back to this freshness element. And one piece as well that I should add, going back to the uniqueness, when you look, this is one way that you can do a quick scan of your content. Okay. So when you've optimized it inside of Rankability, you want to see certain areas where there's no green. And I know that might sound a little weird, right? But we're like, the green is good. We want green. That means that we're hitting on the core topics. We're building out highly relevant content, but you want some sections where there's no green, because that's an indication that you're adding unique content in there. Like original content is showing up, because you have to remember the way that this tool works is we're extracting all of these topic ideas from the competitors. So if those topics are not showing up here, that means that they aren't talking about them. And that's good. You want to have some stuff in here that no one else is talking about. Now, over time, competitors can catch up, right? They will re-optimize based on your stuff, and they will now talk about the stuff that you talked about. So there is kind of a moving target in that way. But this is what you want. So you can even see here, I have full sections where no one else has talked about certain things. Okay. Doesn't need to be huge, doesn't need to be like, a dissertation, but just little blocks here and there where it's like you're adding some uniqueness in there. That will be a huge difference maker. Okay. All right. So uniqueness, freshness, fulfillment. When I talk about fulfillment, that means fulfilling the search intent. Okay. That's all that means. You can fulfill search intent many different ways. I think sometimes people get a little too rigid with trying to fulfill. They'll say, well, if it's a commercial keyword, I have to do a category page, or if it's informational, I have to do a blog post. You don't, Google doesn't care, right? Like we think that Google cares, but they don't. Google just indexes pages. It doesn't care whether it's a category or a blog post. So you can always see contrary examples throughout the SERPs. Okay. So the key is just put yourselves in the shoes of the searcher. That's it. When someone searches best CMS for SEO, I think it's very clear what they want. Okay. I'm going to give them what they want. They came to know what it is. Here's all the objective data that I have. And you can make a decision on your own for which one you want to invest in. That's not what this is about. This is about telling you what's the best one specifically for SEO. So I'm going to give you the information you came for. So always front load the information that they really want. In the context of e-commerce, if someone is searching, blue shoes, show them the blue shoes. Don't tell them the history of blue shoes and then finally show the products. Like you have to just switch the pages around. And I see this a lot on the local level, by the way, with like personal injury lawyers. Okay. This is an industry I've worked in extensively. And what they'll do is they'll be, St. Louis personal injury lawyer. You land on that service page and there's like a whole dissertation about statistics and all this stuff that the person does not care about. The searcher does not care about, because someone who's looking for a personal injury lawyer, they're not interested in like learning about personal injury. They just want to know, how much money am I going to get from this claim? Like that's what they care about. And they also want to know, like, is this the right attorney for me? That's what matters. So that's why you need to reposition your content. And that's why I know I've been getting a lot of questions about in the content brief. Okay. And when you go into the outline and you generate an outline, it tends to skew towards giving informational angles. That's what it tends to do. Now we're working on this to resolve this particular challenge, but I'll tell you, there's just certain keywords where you're all like, AI is always going to struggle with the type of content that you need to put on those pages. So for example, like I'll show you, this is a microsite that I have. Okay. If I tried to create this content with AI, it would suck. It just wouldn't work, right? And this is a transactional page. I'm targeting St. Louis SEO. I'm targeting St. Louis SEO consultant clearly. I think it's very clear. But you see that like what I'm doing here, this type of content is very different than an informational piece of content. Like I have one objective here, which is to get people to convert. So I'm adding results. I'm adding, the reasons why you need an SEO consultant. Okay. I'm adding things about the services, and this is all weird over here, but it's a different type of content angle. It's not informational. I'm not telling them, here's how to do keyword research. Like that's not what's going to help move the needle. Okay. And that's why you got to be really careful with that, because I see it a lot on transactional pages. People will put informational content on a transactional page, and that's not good. We want to make sure that the content is specific to the intent of what that person really wants. Okay. And this is just like direct response copywriting 101. Okay. And this is what you should be thinking about. So when I talk about fulfilling intent, that's what I mean. I talk about really making sure that the page is structured to drive whatever conversion you're going for. In the context of informational content, it's hard to pinpoint what the what the true objective is. But for me, when I create an informational piece of content like this one, it's very clear that my objective is to take that searcher and push them deeper into the funnel. Where I'm trying to take them from not knowing who we are, they're totally unaware of our brand, to all of a sudden being aware of our brand, which is, okay, what is this Gotcha SEO Academy? And who's this Nathan Gotch guy? Let's dig into this and see what it is. Now I've got them a little bit deeper in the funnel, and I can serve up different content to them because now they're in my world, right? So with informational content, we should be trying to move them deeper. That's the goal. Either you're trying to move them deeper just by going to the next level, or you try to get them on your email list, whatever it is. But we don't want to just create informational content. At least I don't, just out of the goodness of our heart. I don't think that's the objective of what we're trying to do. Like, got to get them to do stuff. Okay. And that's why, like, I try to front load all the things that I want them to do early on in the content. Okay. Okay. So fulfillment. And then now we're finally on to relevance. You guys know relevance is important. I'm not going to slam you with that. Your page needs to be highly, highly relevant. And that's basically what our software is measuring, right? We're measuring the relevance of your content relative to, the competitors. That's it. And you want to be the most relevant option. That is it. Like, you should aim to be the most relevant page. I've tested this, by the way, and I've talked about the law of diminishing returns as far as the score. It's hard to say like what the perfect score is. Like, is it exactly at the optimal? Is it 10% above the optimal? Is it 100? Is it below the optimal? Like, it's hard to say. It's really, really difficult. But based on what I've seen so far, being slightly above the optimal seems to be kind of the best range to be in. I've tested going absolutely, full on optimization, like perfect 100 rankability score. And I haven't actually seen much of a difference between having like a 75 and 100. I think it really just matters that you're above the people that you're up against. So like in the context of this one, the optimal was 64. So that was pretty high. Like, that's a pretty high target to hit. I've seen other ones where the optimal was like 30. So in that case, I'm still going to go up to probably a 60 or a 70, even if it's calling for a 30, just because, I don't know. I think it feels like a game. So maybe I just need to, maybe I just have a gaming mentality. Maybe there's no need for it. Right. But that's just what I try to do. Because the way I think about this, I just want to build the most relevant piece of content. That's it. And just to make sure, I know I've talked about this a lot, but this is the one big difference between Rankability and all these other tools out there. Like, we do show the amount of times that the average usage, but this is really just for your own information. Like, if you're interested, it's there, you can see it. But when I'm creating content, I don't even care about how many times it's mentioned. I don't even think about that. It doesn't cross my mind. It makes no difference as far as performance. And in fact, I'll tell you, the opposite is actually true. If you take the recommendations of, hey, you should say technical SEO 70 times in the content, and then you go and do that, I can almost guarantee you your content's going to do worse. It's just keyword stuffing. That's all it is. It will not do better. So the key is, like, you just need to hit on that topic and then write naturally. Just hit on that topic, make sure you cover it to the fullest extent, and then just write naturally. That's it. Okay. Sometimes you don't even need to cover it that well. You just need to mention it. Like, just mention it somewhere that makes sense. Okay. All right. So relevance, and then engagement. All right. That is all. Like, engagement will largely be based on all this other stuff that you did. There's a lot of things that obviously can drive that as well, which is like, if your page doesn't load fast, that's going to cause problems. Okay. Like, very simple things. Make sure your content loads fast. Make sure it's easy to actually scan. That is the key. Most people will scan content before they commit to actually reading it. So your content should always be built with that in mind. And so when it comes to informational content, use a lot of headings, use a lot of visuals, break the content up. I mean, you'll see it. Very rarely do I have a paragraph that's more than 2 sentences. Very, very rarely. Like, occasionally I'll have one that's 3, but it's extremely rare. And I'm not saying, I'm I'm the king of copywriting here, but I'm just saying, like, I know what keeps people engaged as far as internet content. Okay. And I have just, I don't know if I've ever really told a lot of people, but I have a formal background in my degree is in political science. Okay. It's very odd. All right. I have a degree in political science. So I spent my entire college experience just writing very formal content, like need to have your sources cited and all this stuff, and like very formal content. So for me to make this adjustment to this type of content took a long time, but it's very different. Like you almost have to take your school thinking and throw it in the trash and you have to recondition yourself on how to actually write internet based content. If you want to know how to do this well, this is not easy and this is not fun. What I'm about to give, this is recommendation, but it works. Go to someone like Frank Kern. Okay, you go to someone like Frank Kern and go to one of his pieces of content. All right, you just go to one of his articles and just like go to this one, for example. First of all, just see how he writes. Like, don't look at the words necessarily, but just see, like, study it, study what he does. Cause this is what I did. I studied him and I studied how he would write. And then the next, like once you've studied it and you kind of see the kind of the style, what you would do is you actually will write this word for word. Like you literally just put up a Google Doc and start writing exactly what he's writing. And I know it sounds really weird, but I'm telling you, this actually works. But like the first time I heard this recommendation, I was reading, I don't know what direct response book I was reading, but they're like, if you want to get better at copywriting, just find a good copywriter and just write their write their whole sales letter from scratch, exactly how they wrote it. And it works. It literally works. So, and then of course, the other way to do it is just keep writing more. Okay. But this is just a small example, and you can see there's no big paragraphs here. And he's not like Frank Kern is not an SEO guy. He's a direct response guy. His job is to get people to do stuff with his copy. So when he creates content, his number one objective is to get someone to convert. Okay. So with that same mentality, we should be creating our SEO content in the same way, because we know that if we can keep them engaged, engagement leads to conversions. And there's also kind of that secondary element that you need to consider is if you have good engagement, that leads to positive user signals. Some of the positive user signals that should occur on your site, and this is, by the way, this is one of the reasons why a lot of these affiliate sites got nailed, is because what happens with those sites is they start ranking super well. Maybe they've got some engagement, like as far as scrolling and heat maps. But what happens is everyone starts to click off and leave their site and go to another website. And when you look at the sites that perform the best online, I'm not even talking about SEO, just the most successful websites, their number one objective is to get you to not leave, right? You go to Facebook. Facebook doesn't want you to go anywhere except stay on Facebook. YouTube does not want you to leave YouTube. That is not something that they want. They want to keep you locked into their system for as long as possible. So when you start to send people off of your site, you're actually creating kind of a weird signal. So I actually did this with a client, by the way. They had a page that was really, really stubborn. And they built out a microsite in their industry, and they also have their main agency. They're two separate entities. So what they do is they create a lot of informational content in their industry. But then what they would do is they would send people off of the site to their agency site. And so what was happening is every single visitor that came to that site would leave. They wouldn't visit a second page. They wouldn't convert in any way. It just wasn't creating a good environment. So what we did is instead of sending them off to some application on the other website, we just built a little dedicated landing page on that little microsite. So now what happens when the visitor comes to that page, they go to a second page on the same domain, there's a conversion that occurs, they fill out a form, and now that's actually something that Google can track. Therefore, the engagement and the user signals on that website are positive. Okay. And if you actually look inside of Google Analytics 4, you can see engagement rate. Okay. And that's a metric that you should absolutely be looking at as far as measuring. Like you can actually quantifiably see, like, certain pages how much engagement is occurring. And the way that I personally do it is if you go into Screaming Frog, integrate the Google Analytics API, you crawl your whole, and make sure you have to go and select the engagement rate in the settings. You crawl your whole site, and then you can get an average engagement rate for your entire website. So let's say your average engagement rate is 50%. Okay. Then you can use that as your benchmark for looking at every single SEO asset that you have and say, okay, this one's it has a 9% engagement rate. It's well below the average. So let me focus on this one and see what's going on here. And usually you can start to find some correlations. So like even on my own website, I saw that some pages were getting bad engagement rates. And if you go and look at like archive.org, I used to have like a big featured image right here. So it would push this way below the fold. So I just got rid of it. Like I like the featured image is available like to the crawler if you go to like the blog feed, but on the content itself, I just pushed it way above the fold. I just eliminated the possibility that I could be sending them away, right? So small little tweaks like that. And then also using some user tracking type of software. I use Mouseflow for this. So what it does, you install a little script on your website, and then you can see the heat maps. You can see where people kind of like move their cursor around. You can see where they click. It's all very, very important information that can help you kind of improve that engagement rate. Okay. So just want to cover these things. Like I said, if you can focus in on these things, this will make a huge difference, like a huge, huge difference in your SEO performance. Of course, there's other elements we need to consider too, but just for like, the big things, the lead dominoes, these are the elements I would focus on. Okay. So that's it, guys. Let's open up to some Q&A here. You guys got any questions for me? I see some in the chat.
Hey, Nathan, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I struggle sometimes, like I can dissect, let's say the service page, right? It's the keyword, the city, the content, LSI, NLP, variations. The homepage though. So I know you mentioned like, exact name business, exact name domain, but when we're talking about like branding and the homepage, right? Like I get it. Like, how do you get the homepage for the branding for that name, and still be able to, like, obviously, yeah, you link out, you have your navigation bar, but in diagnosing, like, okay, is the homepage optimal? Can you speak on that, like when it's about the brand, the business name, on real clients, and even rank and rent? I think it's important, right? Like building this brand. I just struggle with that. Can you help me to clarify that and polish the way I look at it, especially the homepage? I think the service pages are pretty like, right, whatever that service is, whatever your keyword, but like the homepage.
Right. Well, it's one of the trickiest issues in all of SEO is a homepage. It's truly, it is very, very challenging. And it really is the challenge. So there's a lot of reasons why it's challenging. The first is it really depends on what the long-term ambition of the business is. Okay. So if I'm working with a lawyer that's located in St. Louis and their plan is to only ever be in St. Louis, then I will probably optimize their homepage specifically for St. Louis personal injury lawyer, which is their most important keyword, right? I would do that because they don't have any intent of moving outside of St. Louis. The challenge, though, is a lot of businesses aren't like that. They'd say, oh, well, in the future, I want to go to Chesterfield and I want to go to Baldwin. And so then that, that can kind of complicate the issue in some ways. There's also I'm just using personal injury as an example here because it's just one that I've worked in so much. Another example is a law firm that has locations in multiple states. Okay. So how do you optimize a homepage in that scenario? Well, they've got a St. Louis office, they have a Kansas City office, and they have a Chicago office. Okay. So in that scenario, when now we're crossing state lines, I would probably lean more towards the homepage being not optimized for a specific location instead of just making it purely brand focused. And then isolating those locations on internal pages and building out the clusters in internal pages. So, like I said, it's super variable and it really does depend in that way. And that's just on the local level. As you go into the national level, it's, on the national level, you're almost better. Your best bet's probably just to go pure branded on the homepage in most scenarios. So like, yeah.
Now, do you build outside resources to build that brand? Obviously, like the social medias, right? Maybe even a YouTube or,
Yeah.
but do you have like your tier two go to, like, especially when you're trying to solidify that homepage for the brand? And then if I can add to that in the scenarios you're describing, which are excellent, is what type of content are you just speaking about, like the history? Let's say plumber or service based, because that's what all of mine are, or like your dentist, like what type of content specifically do you want to see in there?
Yeah. So it would depend, like I mentioned, if there's a singular location or multi-location or multi-state type of situation. But let's say I'll just start with the most micro version, which is let's say a plumber that's targeting one city. That's it. So we would first go after their biggest keyword on the homepage, which is, let's say, plumber St. Louis, and then they would have internal pages built for leaky faucet St. Louis and whatever else their sub services are. Commercial pages for me in this context is always about, will this help us drive leads? That's always the perspective that I look at, because it has commercial intent. It's deeper into the funnel, and who's ever searching for a plumber in St. Louis, especially if they add any modifiers, like let's say emergency plumber. Okay, they're not interested in the history of anything. They're interested in fixing the pipe that just burst during the winter. Right. And so their objective is to find out who's going to answer their freaking phone as fast as possible. And for me, I'm just speaking in the context of my own life here, right? Anecdotally, like when our furnace went out in February in the winter, it was like the coldest day of the year. Our furnace decided, this is the day that I'm going out. Okay. All I did was go right into Google and I looked up, furnace repair companies. And I called all of them, and whoever answered first got the job. That was it. It wasn't like I went through some discovery process and no, it's like, I need someone here literally yesterday. Like, you guys win because you answered your phone. Like, that was it. So when it comes to these commercial pages, like, that's the mentality we need to think about. Like, anything that distracts from that objective, which is getting them to call or fill out a form, is not something we want. And so what do we want, right? What are the type of blocks that we want in there? So for me, it's always like, I always want to lead with what influences people the most. Okay. I don't want to get too crazy with psychology influence here, but there are certain things that do get people to move more than other types of content. The biggest one I always rely on is social proof. It's just the best place to start, especially if it's relevant social proof. So like a plumber in St. Louis, I want to make sure that the testimonials and the stories, the befores and afters, I want to make sure those are highly relevant to someone who lives in St. Louis, like highly relevant. The one thing I see a lot of local businesses, like what they'll do, they'll take all their reviews because they think more is better, which it actually isn't. They'll take all the reviews and they'll slap them on every page on their site. And the problem with that is, like, if the reviews are not contextually relevant to that keyword, then not only is that bad for SEO performance, but it's actually bad for conversions. Like, you want to see that if I'm in St. Louis, I want to see these guys that have worked in St. Louis. I don't care if they worked in Baldwin. I want to see that they worked in St. Louis specifically, right? So that's the type of thing that I'm thinking about, is like keeping it really, really tight as far as relevance on that page. And you can always use the rule of three, which is like, find 3 testimonials or 3 stories or 3 befores and afters and put that on that page. And then you do the same thing for the internal pages too. Like, if you've got an emergency plumber St. Louis page, all the testimonials should be about emergencies that were solved with their services, right, in St. Louis. Okay. I know it seems really obvious, but You just see it a lot, right? You did like uh, common sense is not common practice, right? And this is really, really important. So that's where I started. Start with the social proof. What existing kind of material do we have that we can work with? Um, Start there, and then from after that, then I started thinking about what are some other types of authority building elements I can put in. So that's why, like on my not to use my own stuff, but like I picked this video intentionally, right? Like this wasn't like I didn't do this. I could have picked any video that I have, but why did I pick this one specifically? Well, because I know someone searching for an SEO company in St. Louis. I know they probably live in St. Louis more than likely. And I also know that they know what Show Me St. Louis is. And I know they know what KSDK is, right? Because that's an authority publication. And I'm using that as leverage to create more trust. Okay. So anything that you can have, and that's why, like, you know, you see like on my website, like all of this here, like what I'm saying is what I do. Like if you look at this, this is all intentional. There's never anything that I personally do put on the site that's not intentional. Like this is all by design. And so front loading social proof. This is these you know the classic logos. That's just to build more authority and trust. So I'm just thinking about what can I add to this page to build to get someone to know, like, and trust you at the end of the day. Okay, that's the goal. And in fact, if we look at like this is the main page, talking about like how do you actually help the person that you're trying to serve, right? So if they're looking for a plumber, like what do they need to know about hiring a plumber? Like what are some things that would make them feel more comfortable having someone come into their home, right? Like all of our plumbers get background checks. All of our plumbers pass drug tests. All of our plumbers are not going to kill you. Like these are things that are important. Like we want to know that these are good. Like helping them build trust. Like this is all the stuff that we want to go for. And notice, like it has nothing to do with like the history of plumbing or what is plumbing. Like no one cares. No one cares about that. Like they care about solve my problem. How does this solve my problem? And then the other part of it is and this kind of depends. Like this is why rankability is so important, because you can go in here and you can get the word count. And if it's 800 words or something, then you have to be a little more strategic with the type of content you put in there. So buyer guides, like 7 mistakes every home buyer or every homeowner makes when hiring a plumber. Right? Like that type of content. I love using that type of content. That's like what I consider like a buyer guide. And then the one that I use very frequently is just a frequently asked questions section. I'll always add a block in there where I can just start hitting on some FAQs because it's the easiest way to add more meat to an asset. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's where my mind goes when I think about commercial content. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly, I probably should have started off. What is your thought process? And I think you put it out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yep. All right. Let me look at the chat here. Oh, yeah. Abe said, Google says EMD does not work. Yeah, there's a lot of things in that document, the 14,000 variables. But man, EMDs absolutely work. Like they work very, very well as long as you use them the right way. They can be dangerous if you abuse them because they're very easy to over optimize. But as long as you're strategic with what you're doing, they're so incredibly effective. And in fact, I'll tell some of the members of Rankability who are here. I talk about this inside the academy, but there's a strategy that I call the insurance policy strategy. Okay. And sometimes you'll be working with a client where even me, like it's as much, so-called experience that I have and how long I've been doing this, like occasionally I will have a campaign or a keyword that will literally keep me up at night and I cannot figure out why it's not ranking. Google's got a vendetta against some websites. I don't know why. It just is. It's a very rare scenario, but it does happen. In those scenarios, instead of just constantly telling the client, don't worry, yeah, the rankings are going to come, and you just keep reassuring them, what you should do on the back end is build out a micro website that can act as an insurance policy. So I did this with a client recently, and They had a keyword that was really struggling. So I didn't tell them. I just built out this microsite specifically targeting the keyword that they want to go after, just to prove my point. And of course, I'm in an awkward situation now because the microsite is beating my client, and it's one page. It's literally one page exact match domain that's beating my client site in a business that's over 75 years old. Like I don't make the rules, right? I don't make the rules. I just know what works, and that they work. They work very, very well. So, Abe, question.
Nathan, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for giving me this idea on that SEO book that you had. I literally, so I wanted to thank you for that idea because I literally took what you did and I ran with it to the point that I went ahead and bought, look,
Nice.
18 books, including one, I kid you not, guys. This damn book is 580 pages, $111. I bought this book. Literally, I took this idea and ran with it. Now I'm reading every damn book that's in my niche to figure out how to talk about that.
Yep, that's the way to do it.
So thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah. I always love seeing that. People actually taking what I say. That's amazing. Yeah. Dale, you got a question?
Yeah. So I just want to make a comment. So I've been trying to test out optimizing the existing contents for a client. And so I took one of them where I thought about uniqueness. So I added social proof into the article, which none of the competitors had, right? And then I also optimized into the low 90s when the optimal was around 65 or so. And I only did it a few days ago, and it's hit the local map pack already. So
beautiful, very nice. Love hearing that. Awesome.
It does work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well,
thank
good.
You.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Ben, go for it.
Hey, Nathan. So the question I had was regarding the CMS content that you mentioned in the data.
Yeah.
How do you go around getting that data? Obviously you spoke about how you came with a completely unique angle and you had you went and gathered your own data around the CMS. What was your process for gathering that data?
Yeah. So obviously it's going to be unique to whatever data point you're trying to gather. But I can tell you in the context of this one situation, it was very time consuming. So I found a tool that tells you what CMS any website is using. Okay. So I went in there, I found this tool, and come to find out they had an API. So I used their API, and first what I did is I collected, I forgot how many keywords I did. I think it was 10,000 keywords. So I extracted those keywords from, I think it was SEMrush. I extracted the 10,000 keywords. And these were like based on CPC value. Okay. So you could argue that like high CPC value you could argue that the SEO competition will also be high because people that are willing to bid high there will likely pay a lot for SEO as well, right? Those things are typically linked together pretty well. So I extracted those keywords from SEMrush and then extracted all the competitors actually as well for those, the top 10 for each individual keyword. And then I ran all those URLs through this API. So yes.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Yeah. Now, obviously, this is a very unique SEO type of case study. I've done other case studies in other industries where it's not even close to that complex. Like, for example, I did one that was like data center fire statistics. Very simple type of thing. And what we did is we went and just looked at all of the like government type of data sources and just collected all the data from those and then just put it into a curated asset that basically just curated all that data into one place. So that's another thing you can do, which is much easier than what I did with the best CMS. But like I said, this is always the dial that you like, the intensity of the work should be based on the competition. So when I did the CMS one, I knew there was no way I was going to rank and that I was going to beat HubSpot if I didn't do something radical, right? I had to do something radical because there's no way I could beat them. They're too powerful. So it's totally relative to the competition. And I would never do that for like a small little keyword. Like I would never put that much effort in it. So the effort should be, consistent with the competition. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. All right. Let's see. Okay, I'm looking at the chat here. Okay, Param, what are the top things I should improve on my transactional page? I think I kind of answered that one. So yeah, I think I hit that pretty hard there. Let's see. Oh yeah, Frank Kern. Yep. Okay. Yeah, Frank Kern, by the way, guys, he doesn't have a huge personal brand, but I'm telling you, out of the direct response copywriters on this earth, there aren't many people better than him. He is, I've talked about this with other members before, but like you'll get into one of his webinars and you'll know exactly what he's going to do. You're like, you sign up for that webinar, he's going to sell you something. You just know it's coming. You're literally like, you could lock your credit cards away and you could say, I'm not going to buy a single thing from this guy. I just know he's going to sell me. I'm not going to do it. And then at the end of the webinar, all of a sudden, I just bought $1,000 course. And I don't even know what happened. Like, I know he's going to do it. Like, I know he's going to do it to me. And it works every time. That's how good he is. So that's the level that you want to get to. That's my like, my aspiration is to be that good one day. But just study what he does. He is scary good. Yeah. And there are many people like him. So, okay. Let's see. Param said the word count rankability suggests we cross that too much. Should we consider removing words and come near the competitor's word count? Okay, this is a very good. I'm very happy you asked this question. So let's begin with the fact that word count itself is not a ranking factor. Just like the quantity of words is not a ranking factor. However, for you to be able to properly create a comprehensive piece of content that hits on all of these topics requires you to have a certain amount of words. Okay. Like if you just took all these, like, for example, I'll just show you how, you could do this, right? You could go into here. And in fact, let's just do this here. I'll just actually just get rid of this. All right. Because I already recorded the video. Just get rid of this and we can actually go to, we'll go over here, we'll copy these, and then we'll just paste them in. Okay. Perfect score, right? We could do that. Like we could just throw the keywords in there and throw up a page and we should theoretically rank, right? But of course that won't work. It just won't. Like this would not work because this is not like, there's no meat here. Like if you think of the words as food, Google needs the nutrients to understand what it is about, right? And just a list of keywords is not going to do the job. So this is why like it's a complicated issue because the words are not the ranking factor, but the words add context, the words add relevance, which are ranking factors. So it's a weird kind of dynamic, but the point is don't do this. This is why the optimal is what it is. If you were like, if this is 1400 and you could sufficiently do this for a 900, then do it. Like you can always add more. But what I don't recommend doing is looking at this upper range of the 3,400 and saying, let's do 3,000 words. Don't do that. I would aim almost always towards the low end because that is the lowest investment, which means we will have the highest profit per keyword. So that's the way I think about it. Is like, how can I be the most profitable for every keyword? Go with just like, I want to hit that base level and measure the rankings. And if you see like, it's not really going the way that you would like, you can add, let's add another 200 words to it, right? This is kind of like if you go on a diet, the worst thing that you can do is just like, if you're eating 3,000 calories a day, just cut your calories to 1,000. Don't do that. Like you will be like, you'll feel like you're dying like after a few days. Okay. It's better just to like cut your calories by like 100. Right. And you do that for a week and then cut it for another, like take baby steps. You don't have to be radical in these things. And it's better to just think of it as minimum viable content. That's kind of the mentality. Like, okay, I'm publishing this, but I'm also going to iterate on it over time. I'm going to see how it performs. And this is why you have to track individual keyword rankings. I know I see people sometimes who are like, I don't know, they think that that's like so old school and out of date, but like, then why don't I ever see their rankings? Like there's if you don't track it, then you can't improve it. It's that simple. You have to track it. You have to track it, because if you don't track it, it's out of sight, out of mind. The first thing I do in the morning is I open up my rank tracker. I know I've been doing that. I am not kidding, for a decade. That's the first thing I do every morning. Well, actually, sorry. I check my bank account first, and then I check my rankings. Like, that's how closely linked I am to like my priorities. Like, it's money and rankings. That's what I think about, because I want to be able to see on a daily basis, like, what is the movement? And I can make moves very quickly. That's why using the content monitor is so important as well, because you can see how things are moving, and you can move much faster than your competitors. Okay. Okay, Steve. Recently, during the latest unconfirmed update volatility, I had a sales page and also some blog posts that was ranking around page 1 and 2 for nearly 6 months. Out of nowhere, last Tuesday, it dropped. Although it's indexed, it's showing deranked. Yeah. So the first thing I would do is, I don't know what rank tracker you're using. So obviously be careful, because these rank trackers can be very inaccurate occasionally, and they will show your keywords dropping off the map. That can happen. So when I see that, I will almost always do a manual rank track inside of an incognito window and just see, like, is this real or not? And if it is real, believe it or not, the next step is actually to do nothing. I just wait, because occasionally Google just does wacky things, right? It's just that they're like, we have to remember Google is also a SaaS company, and they're running tests all the time with their SERPs. And sometimes the tests don't go the way that they would like, and the SERPs get all terrible. And then and I'm not saying the SERPs are good either all the time either, but they are trying, at least I think that would be their goal, is to have the best results. So they're always running tests, and occasionally your page ends up in those crosshairs. And if that's why it's important just to wait. I'll usually wait it out for at least a week before I make any moves. And then once a week has passed, and if I'm still gone, then I'm going to start to look at that page. I'm going to dig in and start to see, start to analyze the indexation. Like, is there anything that, maybe it's got some maybe loading speed issues, or something that would have forced Google to remove it from the index or the rankings. You said it's indexed, so that's not an issue, but that's what I would start with. Then I would start to look at, was there link loss? Did we lose some backlinks going to this page? Did we lose some links going to our domain as a whole? That can really hurt your rankings a lot of the time. Also looking there's just so many variables where I would start, but that you just have to slowly dissect each element. I actually do have a ranking diagnosis checklist for this, by the way. You can go to my site, Gotcha SEO, to find it. It's not very expensive at all. And I go through this process every single time. Like, if I have a keyword that's either stubborn or a keyword that's fallen off, I go through the ranking diagnosis checklist, because I want to hit every single possible element to ensure that I'm not missing anything. So yeah, that's where I would start, honestly. So any other questions, guys? Anything else? All good. Okay, Simon, I'm sorry I did not call on you today. Anything you'd like to share, Simon? So sorry, I've been just riffing here.
No, all good, man. It's been great. Not really. There's a lot of things on the back end that we're doing. Just let everyone know, as usual. We are currently in the process of upgrading our editor to a much more stable and higher quality editor inside Optimizer. That's going on behind the scenes. There's a whole bunch of other little, if you, as usual, if you guys find any glitches or bugs, just let us know. We have a whole list of, like, our team is working around the clock to get these all cleaned up. Yeah, but no, man, I mean, I think you did a great job. So not really much. I guess one little thing I'll bring up, because you mentioned, if you can just bring up actually your page again, just go to the content optimizer page that you were on, showing like you showed like this one. Okay, so one thing here, guys, we have, as far as the rankability score is concerned, you can see on this one, it says optimal 64 plus. So this may not be relevant for you guys who are really new, but some of you guys have been with us for a while. We actually have increased, this is after testing, we've increased the threshold of what we recommend for optimal scores. Dale actually just let me know earlier today that he actually did this with a piece of content that was like, I think it was originally moderate relevance. He optimized it for something around there. And with the new optimal score, I think it was around 64 plus, something like that, Dale, or something like that. But he let me know that when he increased it to the very relevant, he saw a significant increase in the ranking, right? And I think you're already you boosted up or something like that, Dale, right? So we're definitely seeing that. So yeah. I mean, if you guys basically, if you get to the optimal score, 60, whatever it is, it's going to vary depending on what your competitors are doing. It's not going to just be the same for everything. That's where you'll see the fireworks show go off. So in case some of you guys like wondering what the hell is this fireworks going off, that's what it means. You've just basically reached the optimal score. But there's basically, my point is there's a point of diminishing returns, right? So like if it says in this case for this specific keyword, optimal 64 plus, if you reach 64, you're doing significantly better than most of your competitors. That's what it means, okay? Based on what competitors are ranking on the first page of Google. So there's nothing wrong with boosting it from a 64 to, let's say, an 80. There's nothing wrong or bad about that. But again, like Nathan said, there's a point of diminishing returns. That's why it's not necessary to get to a 100 score every single time. Depends on the person, though. I know some people like myself kind of tend to go overboard with everything. But we're trying to get you to do the minimal amount of work to get the maximum amount of results, right? To save everyone time and money. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up. So yeah, if anything, for those optimal recommendations, like Nathan said, word count, you can kind of shoot towards a low end or whatever makes sense. Because obviously if you see an optimal word count, if it says like 900 and you want to get 65 words in there, you also want to make sure that the content's being written naturally so that, you're not having to kind of stuff the keywords in there, and however long the content ends up being is kind of however the word count is, whatever the word count is. But what I mean is the optimal rankability score is really the one you should focus on, like naturally putting, again, the keywords in there as again, whether you're doing it with writers or AI, just making sure that they're as natural as possible. Because Google, this is why some of our competitors, which we won't mention, but when they have these automatic insertion functions for their NLP, when we've tested the heck out of it, it's crap, because it ends up doing exactly what I just mentioned. It just ends up essentially just randomly scattering them in there. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. And Google's not stupid. This is why keyword stuffing doesn't work anymore, because it's all about natural, right? So anyway, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, if you haven't seen this, I actually have a case study, keyword density, a Google ranking factor. Look what it is. There we go. Thank you. They took my stuff. How nice of them. So, but regardless, I actually did this is even before Rankability even launched. I did a study on this, and keyword density is not a ranking factor. Like, it literally is not. So like any tool that's telling you like you should say technical SEO 76 times and say on-page SEO 9 times, like that is totally the wrong mentality. Like, just don't even think like that. That is just the wrong way to do this whole SEO thing. You have to really think about, I'm building this content for an actual human. Let's start with that. This is for humans. As far as I know, the AI are not conducting their own searches quite yet. That might happen at some point. But for now, these are humans, and we need to create content for humans. So you start with that perspective. And then we also, though, need to make sure we're building out proper relevance. So I won't keep hammering you on that. But I want to answer Steve's question before we sign off here. How valuable are profile links? This kind of goes back to what Alfredo was asking as far as brand building. Okay. And I think on any business, whether it's your own business or a client's business, we need to really be thinking omnipresent type of strategy. That's really the key that we should be thinking about. Now, the one thing that I don't recommend doing is, and I'll just speak like in the context of my own business, right? Like, I don't think it's wise to just start trying to be everywhere at once, because it's so incredibly difficult to get just one channel right. Like, to put it in perspective, like, I've been doing SEO for a decade. Like, this is one channel, like just Google for a decade. Okay. I didn't even start my YouTube channel until 2018. So I had been doing SEO for 6 years, I guess. Yeah. But actually, no, probably almost 7 years. I was only doing Google, nothing else. I'm not kidding. I literally only did Google. And then eventually I was like, I think video is going to be important here. So then I started, getting on YouTube. But like, that's how much of a focus I did on one channel until I decided, okay, now I'm going to add a secondary channel. And then obviously now I added email. Now I've got LinkedIn and X, and you start to add them on. But every channel has its own unique nuances and its own little details. And so that's why you want to be really careful. Don't spread yourself too thin. Like, if you're going to pick a channel, like, say like, okay, I'm going to add YouTube to our repertoire in Q2 or Q3. And that's all I'm going to think about. I'm going to live and breathe YouTube. I'm going to study Mr. Beast for the next 3 months. Okay. That's all I'm going to do. Right. Like, that's the level you have to go to for these channels. Because like I said, when I create content on YouTube, I'll just give you guys some insider stuff here. All right. I'll just tell you, like, I have certain things, like there's strategy on YouTube, like specifically. So like, for example, when that leak came out, the first thing I think about is I want to be one of the first people to get a video out. I'm thinking, because speed is what wins when it comes to these types of things, right? So I normally will actually send my video off to an editor and have them edit it. But in situations like this, I have to jump into the video editing software and actually edit the video. Like, and trust me, I don't enjoy doing that, but I have to, because I have to get this video out. And so like yesterday, I found out about this leak, and literally the minute I found out about that, I dropped everything I was doing, everything. And I just immediately started focusing on getting this video out. That's all I did. Just get this video out as fast as possible. And of course, could the video have been better if I invested a week in it and let my editor do his thing? And yes, it could have. But by the time I would have published the video, no one would have cared anymore about this topic, right? So this is why, like, there is some elements of strategy that do go on here. And this is like, I've published 200 videos now on YouTube. So the more you do something, typically you will get better at it. That's just the nature of it. So this is why, just be really careful not to spread yourself too thin. Now, going back to what Alfredo said, going on the other channels, like going on YouTube, going on X or LinkedIn, or even going on other people's podcasts, like you could do anything really, any other channel other than Google. If you do it well, people will start to be some brand recognition. And if there's some brand awareness, some brand recognition, that leads to branded searches. Now, it's up for debate whether branded searches in Google actually are a ranking factor. No one has been able to quantifiably prove that. But if we're just being logical about it, it probably looks good that people are searching your brand, right? They're coming into Google, they're searching your brand. Like, if I were to predict, that would probably be something that would be beneficial. It certainly doesn't hurt you. So we know that much. And when you look at like a brand that's actually getting branded searches versus some site that only gets traffic from Google and has no branded searches, that could be the difference maker, right? So, so the only way to get brand, and not the only way, but the main way to get branded searches is, one is just to build out a content strategy. So you're going to do content marketing, you're going to get your brand out there, you're going to do all that stuff, and that help drive some organic searches. The other way is obviously that you can do advertising. And in fact, I've had a lot of clients that it's really nice. Like, I bring them on as a client and come to find out they have a ton of branded searches. So I feel like I've basically hit the jackpot for that campaign already at the beginning, right? Because I'm like, oh, okay, this is a real brand. So I'm actually like, this is going to be much easier than working with a plumber who's never done any marketing. Like, that's going to be really challenging, right? So that makes it easier. And I'll tell you, one of the companies, I worked with a big supplement company here in St. Louis, and I didn't know a whole lot about their business, but when I started to dig in, I found out that they were doing radio advertising. And so what was happening is they would do these radio ads, and guess what that would do? They'd say, "Hey, go to the website and put in coupon code, whatever." So all that branded search was literally coming from their radio ads, and that could have potentially been helping the SEO performance as well. So, to build brand awareness, now you're getting into marketing, like digital marketing as a whole. And honestly, at this point, I think it's good for all of us to really start to, to build those skills. And that's like, not to get off on a tangent here, but like I believe personally that like the only true security we have in this world is how many skills we have. Like the more skilled you are, the more valuable you are in the marketplace. So no matter what's happening, if you're highly skilled, you're always going to be in demand compared to someone who is not. So that's why, like, think of all these little channels as like one little extra skill you're adding to your repertoire, like your tool belt, and take your time with it. I think that's really the key. Now, going back to Steve's question on profile backlinks, this is why I brought this up, because just getting a profile backlink or building a profile in general on some platform, like, it's not going to do a lot, right? It's not going to do anything on its own because, first of all, they're no follow. And the way you got to think about backlinks is if anyone else can get that backlink, then it doesn't have much value. It's as simple as that. So if you always look at it from that criteria, you have to ask, like, a link on New York Times versus starting a Twitter profile. Which one's more valuable? Well, obviously New York Times. Like, yeah, obviously that's going to be more valuable because not everyone can get that link. Anyone can sign up. Right now I can sign up and create a Twitter account. Like, it doesn't require any effort. There's no editorial process to get it. There's no anything. It's just you literally, if you have an email address, you can get a link. So therefore, Google's not going to assign a lot of weight to that. So that's why, for me, that's what I think about. Like, if anyone else can do it, it's probably not that good. So anyway, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be back on Wednesday again. Thanks, guys.